this is my Kaun Tujhe remix. So a bit of backstory, I did a Amapiano remix of the song in 2022, and obviously that turned out to be a massive remix. And I know from the people that have spoken to me about it, they've told me that was like one of the first Bollywood Amapiano remixes that they've heard. And yeah, it's nice to hear, you guys liking it. So then I decided on a live to do a Gqom remix of the track. So what I did was I exported the acapella from that project and I pitched it down, because the pitch in the Amapiano remix is quite high. So I pitched it down one semitone, and I'm not going to play it by itself, but I will play the drop section, just that section, because I added, once again, my favorite plugin, Transgate, to the vocal pattern that I did. So that just adds a little bit more movement, because without it, it's just gonna sound the same as the Amapiano remix that I did. It's just the slightest effect that I added to it. And in terms of the other effects, I added a reverb, obviously the Transgate, I added some EQ and a fruity balance for some volume, to bring the volume down. So I'm not messing with the mixer volume, but I just added an alternative to controlling the volume. Now onto the kick. Once again, it's your stock standard Gqom kick pattern. I have it at minus 0.5 dB. So it is quite loud in the mix. The next up is the synth. Now if you can hear the synth, there is a slight movement to it. And the trick that I do is I use grow speed with the saw gate preset, and I play around with the volume of the effect. So as you can see, this is at 40%. So without it, it's the sound that you hear always, but with the ever so slight saw gate effect to it, it adds a little bit of movement. That's an effect that I like doing sometimes on my synth. Next up is the snare. And this pattern is playing pretty much throughout the whole song. And in terms of effects on it, there's nothing. It's just the volume that I've done. Your string, you should know by now, it's the drone string where I have it in pretty much the whole song. But I've taken it out in places where I have another bass, so the bass frequencies do not clash. Then the bass line, which is analog bass 4 from GMS, and I have spoken about this before, but what I like doing, especially with this bass, is adding slide notes. So it just adds a little bit of variety to the sound, because without the slide notes, it sounds just... there's no movement to it. So the slide notes is just adding a pitch bend. That's what it's doing. Then next up is this arp that I added, which is from Flex. And what I did was I added a hyperchorus to it. So without the hyperchorus, with it, just elevates the sound. And I add some sidechain when the kick plays in certain parts of the song, and I just boosted some of the highs. And then obviously we have my crash, which you guys know by now. Your typical Gqom crash. It's a sample that I like using a lot, and even this riser as well. Yeah, I like using that riser a lot. Then there is a Vox, which all I did was added some reverb and an EQ to cut out all the low frequencies. Then you don't really hear the ice crash a lot in Gqom. So yeah, that is basically the intro, breakdown and build up section. So now onto the drop. So what do we have in the drop? We got the kick, synth, snare and string. We then add a clap to add to the groove. And it's sort of following the pattern of the kick. Then this is one of 3 basses that I've added to this track. And I've added pitch slides to this section of the bass. So with the kick, then next up is the second bass, which I like to call it a bass fill, which is this pattern that I like doing a lot with layering a crash on top of it. It's just 2 notes, but it just brings the song to life. So both the bass lines together, it just elevates the song. And in terms of the mixer effects, it's just volume. Then is the whistle. So normally, as you guys know, I like to have the sustain note and then add a transgate to it, but this I decided to draw the pattern. So we have the sustain note and then it's chopped up in the second part. Then what I do is I repeat the second part 2 times, so that's how the pattern goes. Then is the log drum, which is just 2 notes, but this is more like an effect. With the pan, I pan it left and right, so if you are listening with headphones, you'll be able to hear it going from left to right. And I've also added a soft clipper to it to just bring the volume up, and delay. So the delay is actually in the plugin itself. Like I said, it's more a bass effect than a bass line because it just plays in certain pockets of the song. So then we have the hat, which is playing this pattern throughout the whole drop and then the rest of the song. This is the whole drop in context. Moving on to the second part. Now it's pretty much the same thing, it's just that I've added an extra bass line. So this was the bass line that I was talking about, which is the reed bass. It is reed 1 and 2 layered. So with the effects, I've added a love filter, which is doing the side chaining, but the mix knob is quite low on it. But for reed 1, I've added a stereo shaper and the love filter with the sidechain effect, but is at full mix volume, as well as some EQ cutting out some lows and boosting a lot of the highs. You can hear with reed 1, the pumping effect is quite present, whereas with the reed 2, it is there, but it's not as present. You can hear like the ever so slight dip in volume. That is the final part of this remix, and in context with the whole song, this is what it sounds like.